Folks, today is an amazing day for me because I have finally finished my very first mainline Dragon Quest game all the way through to credits, or in this case, second credits, and I have to say that Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch is now one of my all-time favorite RPGs, JRPGs. This game is so good in all of the right ways. I do have some issues with it. It's not a perfect game, I don't think. However, the journey you go on with these characters, the gameplay, the world, even the music, which once again we'll talk about, I think this game does so much right that it deserves to be applauded. So that's what we're here today to do. Let's get into it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games. Of course, about 2 weeks ago, I posted a video learning to love Dragon Quest, where I gave kind of my recent experience with the franchise as a whole, and also gave some first impressions of Dragon Quest XI. I was like 30 or 40 hours into Dragon Quest XI at that point. I was already in Act 2. But I have now finished the game, not just the first credits, but also the second credits. Now, I'm not going to be spoiling anything in excruciating detail in this game, but I will highlight general plot beats and story events, just to kind of, convey the point, and really kind of talk about some of my favorite moments in Dragon Quest XI, as this was my first Dragon Quest game. Now, something I noticed, this game is so PS2 coded. And I guess this is a sign that I really need to go play Dragon Quest VIII, because obviously I haven't done that, but this feels like a JRPG that I would have played on PS2 growing up. That was the feeling I had throughout the entire thing, and that is a compliment. Do not think that's a negative thing. This feels like a game I would have played on PS2, just modernized, looking all pretty with, orchestrated music and all that, just, the modern affordances you would expect of a JRPG. But it definitely feels like a game from that era, and that is awesome, because it offers this sense of nostalgia for a franchise that I don't have much experience with. I have a lot of experience with Akira Toriyama's art and direction and all of that, so inherently some of the DNA from Dragon Ball is there, so I guess I feel a little nostalgic from that angle as well, but it really does feel like a game from that generation, and that is really great. So going into this, I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about the story, and that I always knew Dragon Quest stories were relatively simplistic compared to a lot of other RPGs, especially some of my favorites. I love, Xenoblade Chronicles, Final Fantasy, and Kingdom Hearts. So I wasn't sure how I was going to feel going into this game, knowing that it was going to be relatively simplistic, at least compared to those games. But as a change of pace and a much more lighthearted adventure, this really hit the spot for me, at least at the right time. I could see another scenario where I played this at a different time in my life, and maybe I wasn't feeling the story, I wasn't feeling the characters, I wasn't feeling the pacing, and I put the game on the shelf. I could totally see a scenario where that happens, but where I am right now in my life, I guess this game just hit at the exact right moments, because going through this pretty lighthearted, pretty tropey adventure — I don't want to use the word trope because, Dragon Quest invented the trope, right? Going through this pretty standard JRPG story right now for me hits so hard. And when I say it's a pretty standard story, I'm referring to, of course, the luminary, your main character, the hero, being a silent protagonist. I'm referring to you cleansing the world of dark, going through, getting a party, these very standard JRPG things. However, the character stories within, while also pretty basic and one notes, this game does a great job at getting you emotionally connected to characters pretty quickly. Like, almost immediately, I was invested in Eric, for example, or Rab and Jade. As soon as a character pops up on screen, with the exception of the twins — I don't really love the twins all that much, I'll be completely honest. Almost as soon as a character pops up on the screen in this game, they pretty much immediately win me over, in terms of just being invested in their personal struggles and wanting to see more, learning their backstory. And that was one of the reasons that I think Act 2 of this game actually is my favorite act. While Act 1 has a lot of great, mini arcs, the tournaments where you're introduced to Rab and Jade was fantastic. I was so happy that they put a little tournament arc in this game, even if it is a pretty short story section. I really enjoyed that. And something like the mermaid storyline was really touching. I think that was the first moment in the game I was like, whoa, this story is actually really, really good. Getting into the deeper personal stories in Act 2 with Eric and his sister, with Rab and King Erwin, with Sylvando and his father, of course. I think this game has really great pacing in that, and, you know, in the first act, you're kind of just doing more overarching stories, like the mermaid story, like the tournament arc, which have those one-off characters, like the mermaid, like the guy taking steroids or whatever at the tournament, right? But then into Act 2, you really hone in on your party members and their backstories, and it just works so well, because at that point, you're already pretty invested, and, you know, like I said, seeing Erwin's story with Rab and, of course, the Luminary was just really touching and really sad. With that being said, though, this is where I do want to voice one of my more major criticisms with the game, and I'm kind of like 50-50 on it, on how I feel. I think I'll need to sit on this for a couple of years and really kind of explore my thoughts more, but, and I won't spoil anything, but if you played the game, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Act 2 into Act 3, what they do, I don't love it. Like, the content within Act 3 is very good, but they treat it as a post-game, and I understand why they did it now, because it's like a whole separate thing. I don't want to get into it with that, because I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't played, but Act 3, while still very fun and enjoyable, you know, you're re-going through areas when you're doing these trials, which felt a little repetitive, but also, the characters, a lot of that stuff feels a little undone, so to speak, by Act 3, which just made it a little harder to connect to the actual ending of the game. I'll leave it at that. I still enjoy it. I enjoy the final boss. Like, I like all that stuff, but, man, I understand why they did it. I really do. But I kind of wish they hadn't, you know? But my issues with the final act aside, I do want to reiterate how good the characters are in this game and their stories. You know, I'm not going to say who it is, but the 8th playable character you get in your party, I wasn't sure if I would like them. One of my favorite characters in the game. I absolutely love them. Sylvando is such a unique, fun, flamboyant, joyous character, and he's just done really, really well. Once again, Eric and his sister, you know, Eric, from all the, like, stuff I had seen beforehand, I thought Eric was going to be, like, this really Sasuke-type character. He kind of reminded me of, like, a Sasuke. He's not really a Sasuke. And getting into a story with his sister later in the game was just awesome. And then, yeah, I do want to once again mention Rab and Erwin. Once again, no spoilers, but man, that story was really good. So yeah, I totally love the story and characters, with, you know, one minor or major grievance with the structure of Act 3. But what about the gameplay in Dragon Quest XI? This is my first time playing a mainline Dragon Quest game. How do I feel about the gameplay? Well, if you've played any turn-based game, you're not going to feel too out of your element in Dragon Quest XI, because just like the story, the gameplay is, once again, very, very standard JRPG. But they do enough with it to keep it interesting throughout the game. Specifically, I really enjoy the skill tree and how easy it is to respec your characters and try out different builds and strategies. Eric, for example, do you want to do knives or boomerangs or just a sword? You know, that kind of thing. Just kind of experimenting with the skill tree was a lot of fun. And the turn-based combats, at least in the Switch version, you know, they added the speed up function, which I didn't turn on for a while. I've kind of set a rule with myself recently where I'm not allowed to do that until I'm grinding, or like I'm really late into the game or something, because it does kind of take something away from the experience, in my opinion. And I think the important thing to note with Dragon Quest XI is, at least for me, as someone who, quite frankly, I will admit, I don't play JRPGs that often. I like to think I do, but the reality is I play 1 or 2 a year. So I'm not like an expert at JRPGs. I would say, from my experience, the balancing of this game is pretty good. Leaning towards a little too easy, especially towards the end, but I would say overall the balance throughout this game was pretty solid. It never got to the point where, like, I needed to grind. I did, however, grind because I just found a lot of joy in grinding metal slimes, you know. And by the end of the game, I was doing that Hallelujah Electrolyte strategy just because I wanted to be max level for the final boss, which that also definitely made the final boss really easy. But yeah, I just think the gameplay is actually really solid, and while it might not blow you away, it is that classic turn-based combat with enough of its own flair that made it, you know, feel enjoyable to play for, you know, the 70 hours I spent with the game. I really appreciate the tactics as well for when you're just running around the overworld. You know, this game doesn't have random encounters, which, once again, very appreciated, but I didn't really treat it like that. If I saw an enemy, I normally went and fought it. So when you're just doing stuff like that, it was nice having all your other party members when to, you know, fight wisely or focus on healing, that kind of thing, just to kind of speed up the process a little bit. For the hero, I literally always had follow orders when I never changed that. But for the other characters, I would just put on the tactics sometimes, not for boss fights or anything. But, you know, having some sort of auto battle did make playing through the game a little bit easier, you know, and not every encounter had to be this math equation of what I need to do here, which felt nice. Something I wasn't really sure if I liked at first were the pet powers, and I'm still not quite sure if I love them. But basically what happens is when you're battling, after X amount of turns, random number of turns, your characters will get powered up. And if 2 certain characters are powered up or if 3 certain characters are powered up, you can basically do these like special attacks that sometimes will put an enemy to sleep or just do a lot of damage. And while it's cool that there's this random element to when your characters get pepped up, it's also kind of like, I wish there was more rhyme or reason to when this happens. Great example here, one of the first bosses that really had me stuck was Booga in Act 2, I believe. And I was at a wall, man. So I just ran around, fought wild enemies. I wasn't grinding to level up. I was just grinding to get my pet powers so I would have some sort of advantage when I got into the battle for the first time. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's fine. I just don't love the mechanic overall, I don't think. But it's fine. Outside of battle, I did really also just enjoy running around and seeing all the sights that Erdrea has to offer. It has pretty much every type of biome you would expect. I was kind of surprised by the lack of traditional dungeons that you expect in JRPGs. There are dungeons in this game, but they're not as often as I would have expected. Most of the areas in this game are you going through an open world section, getting to a town, doing some story in the town, and then moving on to the next thing. With some dungeons in there, but it's really not as heavy as I was expecting, which honestly I kind of liked. But yeah, just going around and exploring the world map, I think the map in of itself almost becomes a character because the map, it's not too big, you know? You're revisiting every area in Act 2. It doesn't get bigger with Act 2. You just re-go through all the areas with new stories, so you really get acquainted with Erdrea and all the different cities. And I actually really like that because for me, it didn't feel like any town in this game was just like a one-off town, except for maybe that first one where you meet Eric. Also, something else relating to story kind of, or also just re-exploring areas while we're on the subject here. I do want to applaud the writers of this game because literally anytime anything happens, every single NPC has new dialogue. Your party members have new dialogue for whatever's happening, and that's completely optional. You don't need to talk to them, but you can. Same thing goes for pretty much every NPC. If you're in a storyline with that town as like a focal point or something, they all have unique dialogue before the thing happens, during the event, and then after you save the town or something. They all have unique dialogue, which I thought was really impressive. Even like there's like a flashback section where you're playing through a flashback, and it's like this huge area and there's NPCs everywhere and you don't have to talk to like any of them, but they all have unique dialogue, which I thought was really impressive. Maybe a pretty simple thing overall for RPGs these days, but I thought that was pretty impressive. I also think the music in this game is very, very good. I mean, Dragon Quest music has some sauce to it, right? It is like Final Fantasy where you hear Dragon Quest music, you know you're listening to Dragon Quest music, and that is true of everything in this game. However, the issue is, and in fact, my girlfriend actually voiced this as well because she was in the room a lot while I played this game, it's not that there's not enough music in this game, it's that they didn't spread it out enough, or like there needed to be some more overworld tracks. I know you can switch to the overworld theme from Dragon Quest VIII as well as the battle theme, I think, but there needed to be more overworld music, basically, is what this comes down to. And maybe some more town music. I know like that's another Dragon Quest trope, is like all the towns gonna have similar music, but like they need to do more, because when you're 70 hours into a game, it's just like, come on, you know, there needs to be more music when you're exploring the overworld for dozens of hours, not just the same theme over and over. That same theme is very good, and I frankly, I personally wasn't very sick of it, but when my girlfriend's telling me like, hey, that music's really getting annoying, there's an issue. So yeah, I think the music in this game is great. I just think while there is enough of it, they just didn't spread it out enough. Like there's some really good music that you only hear once, and it's just like, wouldn't that time orchestrating this song or making this song, wouldn't that have been better spent on like another overworld theme for like, I don't know, just like the snow areas or something? I don't know. And speaking of audio, I do want to mention the voice acting in this game, which at first I was pretty conflicted on. I'm talking about the dub here. I did try the Japanese audio as well, and I wasn't really vibing with that either. But at first, I really wasn't loving the dub, specifically Eric's voice. That's when I was like, I don't know if I like this. But once you get further into the game and you realize how diverse the cast of characters are in terms of their backgrounds and just the accents they have, it actually becomes like a pretty goated dub cast, in my opinion. Like, there's so many different backgrounds in this game, it feels like, and in terms of accents and all that, which really made the world feel more alive. And eventually I was like, yeah, no, wait, actually the dub in this game is really good. It takes a while to get used to, but once you get used to it, I really liked it. And finally, before I do my closing thoughts here, I do want to go over the stuff that I didn't experience in Dragon Quest XI. I mentioned earlier it took me about 70 hours to beat the game. I know there's going to be comments being like, you played through the game way too fast. I'll admit, there is a decent amount of stuff I didn't really engage with that much, and I have a specific reason for. I know I'm going to replay this game eventually. Specifically, I did not really do anything in Talkington. I basically didn't do anything over there because it is so clearly nostalgia-fueled, where you're going to past areas in past Dragon Quest games. I didn't feel it was my place to even touch that mode, basically, because I know I'm going to play through Dragon Quest 1 through 9, and I know I'm going to really enjoy them, or at least I expect I will really enjoy them. I didn't want to go to Talkington and not get it, you know? So I'm saving that for a future replay. I could see myself in 5-10 years replaying Dragon Quest XI after I've played every other Dragon Quest game and really enjoying Talkington. I really like the 2D aspect of this game, which I haven't mentioned, the fact that you can go to 2D pretty much at any time. I do wish it was a little bit easier because you have to like save and make a new file at the beginning of whatever quest you're on or storyline. You know, I wish it was literally just a button press. That would have been really cool, but Talkington I just completely avoided. And in general, I'll be honest, I didn't engage with that many side quests in this game. I did some, you know, I'm not going to say I didn't do any, but I would say I did maybe 30% of the side quests, because the ones I did, I don't know. For me, it depends on how I'm feeling, you know, it depends on the time. Sometimes side quests, I get really engaged and I really want to like go for the platinum trophy, for example, or something, although I did play this on Switch. This time I was just really engaged in the main story and the characters, that going around doing side quests didn't feel that engaging. I don't know if that's a fault on the game itself, or if that was just me being a lazy bum who just wanted to get through the game. Even though I really enjoyed it, I really wasn't, you know, I didn't enjoy the side quests to anywhere near the extent that I did the main story. You know, I didn't feel that itch to 100% this game, complete the bestiary, complete the forge. I really didn't even forge that much stuff in this game, to be completely honest with you. So there's a lot of Dragon Quest XI I haven't experienced, but that's also kind of by design, because like I said, I do plan on replaying this eventually, so now I'll have Talkington, I'll have all these extra side quests. But in terms of like the main story stuff, I did everything in Act 3. I made sure I did all the extra stories in Act 3. I know people are going to comment like, oh, did you do everything? Yes, I did everything in Act 3. I got all the options from doing all the trials. Like, I did do all that, but I did leave Talkington, the side quests, the forge, and the bestiary. That's something I'll come back to on a subsequent playthrough. With all that being said, Dragon Quest XI is a game that I think I'm going to grow even more fond of over time. I think this is a game that I will think about in 2 years and be like, yeah, remember when I was playing Dragon Quest XI? You know, because some games, you have that honeymoon phase and you think you really, really love it. And then eventually you kind of cool down and you're like, it's fine. But, you know, it's taken me a month to play through Dragon Quest XI, and I the more I think about it, the more I like it. And I don't know if that will ever change. I think I will just continue to like Dragon Quest XI more and more as time passes, especially as I go back and play other Dragon Quest games, and I gain a fonder appreciation of what they did with this game in terms of just doing Dragon Quest in the highest budget possible, or at least up to this point, the highest budget for a Dragon Quest game. I think I will continue to appreciate this game more and more, which makes me happy that I played it first. You know, I could have started with 5. A lot of people recommended that, or 8, and maybe 8 would have been a good starting place as well, but playing 11 first, I feel like was a good choice for me. And I'm very happy I'm into the series now. You know, I've played spinoffs before, but I just have not played a mainline Dragon Quest game, and it feels good to finally say I've done that, because This is a deeply important series of video games, and I want to be a part of it. And I'm glad I am now because it is really good. Dragon Quest XI-S on the Switch is definitely one of the best games I've played in recent years, and I look forward to hyping up Dragon Quest III HD 2D and Dragon Quest XII. I know it's already been 3 years since they announced those, but I will be looking forward to those as they release now, and going back and playing other Dragon Quest games. I know a lot of people have recommended Dragon Quest VIII. I actually did buy a copy of Dragon Quest IV on eBay. Not the cheapest game in the world, not the most expensive Dragon Quest game on DS though, so I might do that. But also, you know, I was thinking like, oh, I want to go right into Dragon Quest IV or something. I think I'm going to take a break. I don't want to over Dragon Quest myself here. I think I'm actually going to go back and play Final Fantasy 16 first, because I didn't finish that game last year, so I think I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll do a video on that as well if this does well. I know it's kind of separate, but Square Enix, you know. So yeah, Dragon Quest XI-S, very enjoyable game. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you share the same joys, the same grievances with Dragon Quest XI as I do? You know, I think, you know, I haven't like seen what the fan reception is to this game. Some people did warn me about Act 3 before going in, but like I didn't really know what that meant. I don't really know what the fans think of this game, other than I know it's one of the favorites. I don't really know what like the you know, minute issues with the game are to a lot of people. So I'll be interested in getting a discussion going down in the comments below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch and Dragon Quest and JRPG content moving forward into the future, and follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Until next time, folks, peace.